What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Action Network podcast presented by FanDuel. I'm your host, Chris Raybon, and I'm excited to be here today talking some NFL with the Prime Minister of Degenerate Nation, none other than Stucky. Stuck, what's going on?
What's up, brother? Happy weekend. And well, I guess everyone's gonna be listening to this on Monday morning. So happy Monday to everyone. Always nice to spit some NFL with you. If you haven't checked it out, we had our post or pre-draft. You and I did our pre-draft episode, talked some division futures, which most of them are still out there, which we liked. Went through some of the win totals. Then you and Freeman did the post-draft analysis. And then this will be the schedule of this episode. And then later this summer, once the win total markets have settled down, and obviously we have a lot of content on actionnetwork.com, you and I and maybe our colleague and friend Sean Kerner will, as we always do in August, we'll have a bunch of episodes previewing all of the divisions. So keep an eye out for that later in the summer. But it's always a good time to catch up after the schedules are officially leaked and then released.
Oh, yeah. I'm excited because, we're going to kind of talk through these, how these schedules are looking and the implications. But we're also going to use this episode to just kind of go over our, more concrete, updated projections and thoughts and outlooks on these teams. Now that the draft is complete, we got the schedule. We're pretty much ready to go and kind of get into really kind of nailing down what we think these teams are going to look like. So let's get it popping with the let's start with the Buffalo Bills. I think it's interesting that they open at the Jets, and I feel like the Jets are already being they've been overrated since Aaron Rodgers became a reality, but I think they're only I think the Bills are only like a 1.5 point favorite, which I think is interesting because if there's ever a time for Rodgers to struggle, Hackett to struggle, it would be week one. He's no-showed his last couple of week ones, but what are your just thoughts overall on how this Bills team is taking shape and any notes on their schedule?
Yeah, Bills. I mean, look, we talked about this before. The Bills are kind of rolling with what they got, right? Maybe a slight weakness at middle linebacker, but it's pretty much looks like that. We'll see if Von Miller can be healthy, but it's pretty much the roster that it's one of the best in the NFL that they had last year, and they're going to run it back this year. The interesting thing with the Bills is I think their division as a whole, there's still some questions with the Patriots, but their division as a whole got more difficult, and they're already in the AFC, right? Because you bring Rodgers to the Jets. I do agree that the Jets are overrated, but they definitely upgraded their weakest position on the team at quarterback, which is obviously important. I think the Dolphins are improved as well. So their division is tougher. They're in a tough conference. I think their win total is like under 12 juice. I project them right around 12. They do go to London, and they will lose a home game and play the Jags, who already be there, which is an interesting spot. The Jags have 2 games in London. I think everyone knows that by now. They have some tough road games out of division. We were talking about their division's tough. Chargers, Chiefs, Bengals, and Eagles. Their bye is late. There's a couple things I do like about their schedule. They get the Eagles coming off of a Monday night game on Sunday. On a Sunday, Eagles are coming off a Monday night game. They have a bye before they play the Chiefs, which is really important. So, I think that the end of the season, at least they get a bye, but is brutal. I mean, you're going, Bengals, Broncos, Jets, Eagles, bye, Chiefs, Cowboys, Chargers, Patriots, Dolphins, 4 of last 6 on the road. And they go, there's a lot of like marquee games. They go October 23rd to December 31st with only one 1 p.m. game. So it's a tough schedule. Overall, their division's tougher. I think that they're projected right on. So I don't really have any hot takes on the Bills. I think it's going to come down to health, that offensive line, how it comes together, and then just Josh Allen. How consistent can he be this year? But I predict the Bills right around 12. But the interesting thing, look, they go to London. They have some tough road games. But the Bills, when you think about the Bills, you say, oh, they play in Buffalo and they get weather advantage. But really, if you look at their offensive numbers, the Bills have been a juggernaut away from home. So these tough road games and playing in London, losing a home game, playing indoors, over. Like, I don't think that's that big of a deal. So I project them right around 12. No value either way, but it's definitely a tough schedule as you would expect. And they do lose a home game, having to go overseas to play a team that will already be there, which is definitely an interesting spot against Jacksonville. Brutal finish to their schedule. But the Bills are who we thought, we know. There's not much intrigue or mystery there. One of the best teams in the NFL, right there with the Chiefs.
Intrigue and mystery, that may be a little more descriptive of the Bills' week 1 opponent, the Jets. So let's talk about them. I've made it clear that I think this team is overrated. I'll probably be looking to fade them more likely than not. I still love the defense, but we also know that defense, it's a little harder to maintain at an elite level from year to year than offense. And I also, I don't know how much exactly. I don't think we know exactly how much of Aaron Rodgers' decline last year was due just solely to the thumb injury, how much of it had to do with losing Devontae Adams, and how much of it had to do with just general age-related decline. So I think that's a big question kind of surrounding the Jets. But again, I do think that week 1 is not a great time to invest in them, and it doesn't get it's pretty, maybe it's better. There might have been in line to lose anyway. So maybe playing Buffalo at that point is actually better. But I do think they're a good bet to kind of be behind the 8 ball in the division. And they also got a matchup with KC in week 4. So it doesn't, and Dallas at Dallas in week 2. So the schedule makers really didn't let Aaron Rodgers ease in at all. I mean, you go Buffalo at Dallas, you play the Patriots, which, that's always, Bill Belichick's always going to have something for you. And then you play Kansas City, and then go to Denver and Mile High, and then you play the NFC champion Eagles. So the schedule makers, I mean, that's kind of a brutal stretch to start the year for New York, but then they get to bye.
Yeah. So from a raw, it's just, you'll hear Eagles, for example, have the hardest schedule. But that's based just on, wins last year, which is not a great way to look at it.
Mm-mm.
So when I mention my strength of schedules, it's based on my power ratings and then projecting out the wins and then your opponent. So I had the Bills with the 4th hardest schedule in the NFL, won their division. They've won it each of the last 3 years. I had the Jets with the 3rd hardest.
Mm-hmm.
So they have a tougher schedule overall. I mean, we're splitting hairs here, but still. However, their win total is sitting right around, I think it's 10 under 10 juiced. I'm at 9-3. And I do think they're a little overrated. Be looking to fade them because I think Rodgers is definitely on the decline. However, there are some things I like about their schedule. So they're in the AFC to get 9 home games, right? And they don't play any overseas games. They play at the Giants after a bye. That's basically as close to a home game as you can get, right? So you could argue that they have 9.5, 10 home games. And then I like how their schedule sets up weather-wise, right? They have a stretch of November 24th, weather starts to get a little iffy in New York. They play Miami, warm weather team, Atlanta, dome team, Houston, 3 straight home games, end of November into December. And then they go down to Miami in December. If you're going to go down to Miami, that's when you probably want to go. You don't want to go when it's real hot and humid. So I don't mind I like how their schedule breaks from a weather perspective. Their schedule is really tough early on because they have that game against the Bills. You lose that game on Monday. Now you have a short week, and then you're going to Dallas. You're coming home for New England before a hyped game against the Chiefs. So, and then, you got the Broncos on the road in altitude before you play the Eagles at home. So the Jets season, I like how it breaks later, and you could argue they have almost 10 home games. I like the second half of their schedule, just some of the intangibles, but they could bury themselves early on, and you cannot escape a hole in the AFC if they start, say, 1-5, 2-4, which isn't out of the question here. So yeah, all eyes on that early part of the schedule. I would lean under Jets. I don't have enough to fade it fade them and go under yet. That might change as the summer goes on. We'll keep an eye on numbers and I'll refine my numbers, but they're definitely a team I'm going to be looking to fade early because I do think that they're overvalued in the market. And a lot of that is because I believe Rodgers is on the decline. It's only natural. Father Time's undefeated, but really interesting, like really tough early part of the schedule. I like some of the things later, but overall it's a very difficult schedule for a team that didn't win their division.
Let me ask you this before we move on. Like, would you make them a road favorite at Denver in week 5?
Yes, I do. I have them favored in 10 games. But you could give them, we'll say gimmies any favored by over, 6 or more, only 2 games. The Texans and Washington at home. That's it. So there's a lot of coin flips in here. I do make them a favorite at Denver. Raw numbers wise. Now I haven't even adjusted it for a spot. Like that's after the Chiefs before the Eagles in altitude.
And the Denver could be better than we think.
Yeah, Denver could be better.
I don't think either of us are very high on Denver at the moment.
Yeah, it'll be close. I would probably make it close to a pick. And raw numbers wise, I make them a favorite, but I also have it circled as like one of the toughest spots of the entire season. You're sandwiched in between the 2 teams that went to the Super Bowl last year in altitude early on in the season where, first week of October. So yeah, that would be close to a coin flip. And, you lose that game, then you're talking Chiefs, Eagles, Bills, at Cowboys on a short week, give them the Patriots, but you lose that Broncos swing game. It's not out of their own possibility. They start 1-5, and then how do you dig out of that hole in the AFC? But if they can somehow get start 3-3, and Rodgers looks good, and then this team definitely has some promise. But I'm on the sell side like you.
Yeah, and again, I really have question marks about Hackett as well. Not just Rodgers, but Hackett's really not proven himself to be a play caller of any that's adding anything positive. So yeah, I don't like the Jets at all. I'm pretty low on them. One of the teams I'm lowest on, but let's pick it up here. The Dolphins. I think we both liked the Dolphins last time we spoke. What are your thoughts on them, coming out of the draft and now that the schedule's out?
Yeah, I was surprised. I mean, I project them at their win total is 9.5, unders juiced a little bit. I project them 9-7, 9-8, but I do have them power rated higher than the Jets. And we talked about this before. I think that they're the team to look at in the division. Yes. They also are a team that I think you can look at with bigger upside if you want to take a shot for a longer shot. I don't think it's the NFL these days. You can take a super long shot, but in the AFC, a team that if the quarterback position comes together, I like the coaching. I think that I like some of the moves on defense that they made. So they only have 7 road games, which is important because they go to London or they go to Germany and play Kansas City. I was surprised. I thought they were going to send Tyreek to Kansas City. So I think that's a break that they get there. I don't believe that they play any teams coming off of a bye. By the way, we'll talk about this. 2 teams play 4 teams coming off of a bye, which is insane. The 49ers and the Rams play four teams coming off byes. No other team plays more than 2 coming off bye. And there's a handful that don't play any coming off of a bye. So, yeah, I think that the schedule, if I look, you only get 7 road games. You get Kansas City in London instead of going to Kansas City. That's a huge break. And, I just mentioned that the Bills and the Dolphins overall, per my power ratings, have a top 4 schedule. Well, I do have the Dolphins number 2. As you would expect, they got to play. Mm-hmm. They're in the AFC. They're in that division. They do have a really tough schedule, but the way that it was constructed, I don't think that, they didn't get any hey, you have 3 straight brutal road games. There's not terrible spots. They play some good teams. They get the bye after London. A lot of the teams are after Germany, I should say. A lot of the teams going overseas didn't elect to take that this year. but I think that their bye is in a good spot in week 10. And yeah, I don't hate the schedule. I think it's pretty fair. We know it was going to be tough, and I think that they made out just with that Chiefs game. So yeah, still high on the Dolphins for upside. I would lean their over win total, but I think division future, if you're more bullish on Tua and that defense, like I think that defense is going to take that next step, which is really important with Fangio. Their corners were so banged up last year. You even bringing in Long, but you bring in Ramsey. So I think their defense is going to take a big step forward. And then I think Tua will as well. Then we got Mike White, who we love there if need be, because there's always the concussion question as well. So yeah, Dolphins, hard schedule as expected, but I think it broke their way. And I still think they're definitely a viable target for some longer shots.
Yeah, I mean, this AFC East could conceivably have the 4 best defenses in the conference. I mean, all 4 of those defenses look they're going to be pretty good. But I agree with you on the Dolphins. Like I was looking at them, they play the Chargers in LA in week 1, and I'm looking at this like this is like they're not really outmatched. Like they match up well with pretty much anybody. So every year there's usually like that one team that takes the jumps to and it kind of comes out of nowhere and becomes an elite team. Like, the Eagles, not that it came out of nowhere. I think we both expected them to do that, but the Dolphins were very good despite a lot of injuries in McDaniel's first year. They were number 8 in DVOA. They were 7th on offense with Tua missing, 4 games and parts of others. And they even had an above average defense as well. So like I think things are looking up for Miami if they can, get a little better injury luck. I think they're what people think the Jets. I've said it before. I think they're what people want the Jets to be as far as taking that jump.
Yeah, I mean, look, we said they only have 7 road games. One of them's at the Chargers to start the year. One of the small. First of all, that's one of your West Coast road games. It's the first game of the year, right?
Yeah.
Travel's not an issue, and that's one of the smallest home field advantages in the NFL. You're also at Washington. Also, another team not a great home field advantage. So, yeah, it's very manageable. I think that they would have been better off having a couple other tougher games at home early in the season, just for that heat, which they didn't get. But other than that, I kind of like the schedule, even because you knew it was going to be a gauntlet regardless.
Yeah, I mean, that playing Buffalo in Miami early last year might have single-handedly won. The weather might have won them that game, because remember that was the game where everyone on Buffalo was collapsing. So now they got to play Buffalo. They don't play them till the last week of the season. So yeah, that's not ideal. But yeah, just from a quality of the team perspective, I really like Miami. And then we have New England, which kind of getting lost in the shuffle here. I feel like most of their offseason has been geared at continuing to improve that defense. Any thoughts on New England?
Yeah, not a fan of what New England did in the offseason overall. I project them only like 7.2 wins. Like usually get a Belichick bump, but look at this track record since Brady's left. It's like, is he still deserving of that bump? Still a Hall of Fame coach, one of the best of all time, but they've definitely lost a step there in Foxborough. I project them. I would lean under. Not enough to play it as of right now. They're definitely, I think, the worst team in this division. We'll see what happens with Mac Jones. Just getting bad vibes out of the camp there. And schedule was what I expected. Nothing crazy. By week 11, they do lose a home game to overseas. They play the Colts, and then they get a bye after that before going to the Giants. They get an extended rest before the Chiefs because they play the Steelers on a Thursday night, then the Chiefs on a Monday night the following week. But then you have a short week going to Denver. So schedule's not crazy either way. Not really high on the Patriots. I think that they're going to bring up the rear in this division. Nothing really noteworthy with the schedule.
Yeah, they're definitely the least intriguing team in this division, but they may very well still be kind of a spoiler because remember, all these teams have good defenses, and the Patriots are always going to be liable to win any divisional matchup. So that'll be interesting. But let's go to the Ravens in the North. They start the year with a nice little cushy home game against the Houston Texans. They also get the Indianapolis Colts in week 3, which could be advantageous because, the Colts might be in some type of transitional period with the quarterback situation, or, be one of Richardson's first starts. So I thought Baltimore could have has a pretty good early season schedule. Late in the year it gets tougher, but what did you think?
Yeah, by the way, I had the Patriots per my numbers with the toughest schedule in the entire NFL, which makes sense with their division and conference. Ravens middle of the pack as far as my strength of schedule ranking. And yeah, you mentioned it early on. This is a team, obviously Lamar Jackson is back. I think they have better depth at wide receiver. I still have questions about the pass rush and corner. But they're due for some injury. After the past 2 years, they're due for some positive injury luck. I like the way that the schedule broke overall. You mentioned it. Houston could get a rookie quarterback week 1. You got your revenge game against Cincy. You could get a rookie quarterback week 3. You could get a rookie quarterback week 6 in London. You play Tennessee. And by the way, that's a road game. They only have 7 road games. You could get, and then you have Kyler Murray week 8. You probably won't get Kyler Murray from what I'm thinking. So you might get a backup with Arizona there. So I like how the schedule broke overall. There's a lot more travel than last year. Last year, they barely traveled at all, but there's, a bunch of West Coast trips, and I think they tripled the amount of miles. And they have the latest bye that they've had since 2001. So we'll see if they could finally stay healthy. And if they do, then that bye could prove very beneficial to kind of as a reset going into the stretch run. And, they close with, after the bye, they get the Rams at home, which is a win. But then you're at the Jags, at the Niners on Christmas night, and then home on a short week back across the country for Miami, and then home against the Steelers. So that's not an easy stretch to end the year, which could make or break like the division, or do they get to the playoffs? Because we know how tough the AFC is. They're also traveling to the Chargers after a home game with the Bengals, but they do get some extra rest before that. So I think overall, I like how the schedule broke, but yeah, we'll see how they just like, I like the beginning part of their schedule outside of you're going to the Browns, to the Steelers, right? 2 division road games. And then you're going to London to take on a feisty Titans team. That's a big swing game just in your season, win totals. And then you're coming home the week right after that and playing the Lions before heading out to the West Coast. So just the travel early on, it could be a little tricky. There's a couple of tricky spots there. I actually show a little value on the over for the Ravens. Upside for division and Super Bowl, I prefer the Browns. I think the Browns and Ravens are similarly power rated. I think the offensive coordinator change will help the Ravens initially early on. There's going to be the element of surprise, but their schedule's not that difficult early on, so maybe that works against them. But I think that the Browns actually have the higher ceiling. And I really love what they did on the offseason, and you get a better price with them, obviously. So, yeah, I think that the Ravens' schedule overall pretty fair, and they're due for some injury luck here. I do show enough value to bet their win total over, not enough on futures.
Yeah, and it's kind of the theme with I would say both of these divisions that we've talked about in the AFC, the East and the North, the divisional matchups are going to be so brutal. And all of these teams could conceivably be better than preseason expectations at the same time. It could just be a gauntlet within the division for these teams. And that's going to obviously have impact as far as win totals and things like that, because, I always think there's more variance when you kind of look at a divisional game. Like I said, the Patriots are liable to beat any of those teams in their division. So Pittsburgh, I would say the same thing about in this division. So yeah, I think the Browns, just because you're getting that price with the Browns, I do agree, but I don't mind the Ravens' future, because I am kind of interested in Lamar Jackson with what should be the best receiving core that he's ever had. I mean,
that's assuming Beckham still has. I don't know if what Beckham still has. True. like, when I always talk about this, when Flacco when they won the Super Bowl, they fired their offensive coordinator, Cam Cameron, in December. And people forget that. And they brought in a new offensive coordinator. And I almost feel like if they did that, like in November this year, like fired their offensive coordinator and then brought in a new one with the element of surprise with Lamar. And because I just don't know if that offense, with that passing offense, right, after there's going to be a whole season of tape, is going to be able to get through the gauntlet of the AFC. That's my worry, because I just don't know. I'm a huge Flowers guy. I loved him. I would love that they got him. Still a rookie wide receiver. I don't know if what Beckham has left post-injury at his age, and they're going to need him to be close to one. And I'm not sure that he's there. I think that the Browns actually have a little higher upside, and they have a better price. But yeah, I mean, they're gonna have a solid. There are some questions on this Ravens defense still, like the pass rush, the second corner spot. But yeah, I mean, you want to talk about just great special teams. They're going to be well coached, and they're due for just enormous positive injury regression. And if you look at this division as a whole, and we'll talk about the other teams, right, I guess now, but like if I was going to target two teams to wager on or invest in, it would be either the Ravens or the Browns. If you look at the Bengals over the past 2 years, one of the luckiest teams in the NFL from an injury standpoint. Last year, the luckiest was the Steelers, believe it or not. They had the fewest games lost to injury overall. And I know the Bengals had the offensive line injuries late as far as timeliness, but overall, Bengals last 2 years, very lucky, very fortunate injury-wise. Steelers, the luckiest last year, still didn't make the playoffs. And they played 9 quarterbacks who aren't going to be starting this year. And if you look, shout out to my guy, Cleve, TA, saw this tweet the other day, the most dropbacks last year faced of quarterbacks ranked 30th or below in EPA per dropback, the Bengals were number one. 43% of the dropbacks they faced were against quarterbacks ranked 30th or lower. Dallas was second. Jacksonville was third. And so, and look, Bengals have benefited from the Lamar stuff. I mean, look at the quarterbacks who have been in that division the past couple of years. You had Watson miss half the year. You had the Steelers trying to figure out who their quarterback was. You had Lamar miss all that time. Now you kind of have like, all right, Watson going into a full season. You have Lamar, presumably in better injury luck with the Ravens. I'm not the biggest Kenny Pickett fan, but they have their quarterback, and I think that they've improved their roster a little bit. So I think the Bengals are the team I'm looking to fade overall. I'm still not a believer in Pickett. I'm not a believer in Canada, but I loved the Steelers draft. And I project them right on, like 8-6. I thought I was going to be going under. Their win total's like under 9 juice. We know the Tomlin stat. But yeah, I think that the Bengals have just been very fortunate in this division. And I think that they might be overvalued here. Because of that, I show enough value in their win total under. They have the 10th hardest schedule per my numbers. Browns, for what it's worth, the 20th, and Steelers right in the middle of the road, just like the Ravens. But yeah, I'd be targeting Browns and Ravens in this division. I know you like the Steelers too, but Browns division is probably my favorite bet for the upside.
Yeah, the Browns' biggest question is that quarterback somehow, like that. But like, it doesn't have to be a question if like Watson can kind of end that real quick if he just kind of shows that he's still capable of doing what he did prior to all, sitting out and all that stuff. But it is somewhat of a concern just because like, these guys don't always bounce back, it's sometimes guys just, it's not necessarily fully physical, but it's not necessarily fully mental either. Like it's kind of a combination. So like, cause he just didn't look quite right last year. So
yeah, I show value in the Browns win total over, but I prefer the futures because of that variance with Watson. Like I'm projecting how I think he's going to be. We've seen it before. So if he can get back to where he was, then, I mean, just the distribution of potential results for the Browns is, I think, pretty as wide as you're going to see in the NFL this year, which is why I prefer going on the upside. And then if you were like, you don't believe in Watson, maybe like an all win total under, because then it could all fall to pieces. But there's other things I like about the Browns. Like they address some of their interior defensive line issues. New defensive coordinator, I think, is going to do wonders for that defense. I talked about that all last year with all the communication issues. Just fixing little things and communication, I think, is going to do wonders. They didn't have great injury luck last year either. And they added speed at receiver, which I think they needed. So, I think that if Watson hits, his team has significant upside, and I think there's a lot of value in division futures. And then if you want to get crazy, they're a team that could go through the gauntlet if Watson gets back to what he was in his prime, because that's what you need. You need an elite quarterback to get through the AFC, and they potentially have that. We don't know, but that's why I think I prefer the futures with the additional variance in the win totals.
Yeah, and from my perspective, I know we kind of talked through. We basically found a team. I think it was from almost every division that we kind of liked heading into the draft as just like a long shot, either for the division or just something like that. Like for me, I ultimately ended up settling. Like my favorites are, the Falcons, the Seahawks, and the Titans. And that's simply because in some of these other divisions, it's like, yeah, I think certain teams are undervalued, but there's generally like more than one that stick out, which kind of makes it a little tougher, I think, to catch, because there's just so many ways that this could go in this division with like even Pittsburgh could be a fourth place team that's 9-8 or something like that, based on the fact that they never lose, more games than they win under Tomlin. So it kind of kills the value a little bit, especially when you consider you're just kind of tying up money for a lot of these futures in these two divisions. So as we start to get into these other divisions, that's why I'm kind of a little more bullish on and also why I'm kind of fading, or not fading, but it's a little tougher for me to go all in on teams in that NFC North as well, which we'll talk about. But
the Browns do get, like, Watson's got to hit early for the division, but you have an early bye too, which isn't great. Week 5 bye, but they got Bengals, Steelers, Ravens, 3 of the first 4. They got a brutal travel schedule in the middle, but you're out at Denver and then the Rams. You can stay out west, and I like their closing stretch. You're home against the Jags, home against the Bears, at the Texans, home against the Jets, and then that's a Thursday night game, week 17. They open with the Bengals, home division dogs, by the way, smack week 1. I think they're 21-5 against the spread since 2009. They're a small home dog. I will be on the Browns in that game, but they close with the Bengals. Maybe that could decide the division. They have 10 days to prepare for that game. And talk about injury luck. The Bengals are maybe due for some injuries, but they got 10. That could matter. They play Thursday the Jets, and then 10 days before that week 18 game at Cincy. So I like how the schedule set up, and they're on the road 5 of 7, starting with week 7. That's with some trips, but I think they could stay out west. And I like this Cleveland team for a lot of the reasons I mentioned.
All right, let's go to this AFC South, because this is one where I am really bullish on the Titans. I feel like they're just kind of being left for dead. Even the way, kind of the tanking talk is being framed, I think it's being framed wrong. Like, when the last time they changed quarterbacks, it was because they were trying to win. Like it does, like if Will Levis ends up playing, I think it's far more likely it's because he's good, he has earned the job or gives them the best chance to win. Then it's like, oh yeah, they're just going to throw in the towel in like one of the weakest divisions in football after they started 7-3 last year and then just barely missed out on the playoffs. Like I don't see it. So I'm pretty bullish on the Titans. I think they are a good bet in week 1 as well. I'm pretty low on the Saints, but I'm curious as to what your thoughts are on what I think is going to be the Titans' main competition, which is the Jacksonville Jaguars, because I kind of see some reasons to be a little bit bearish on them compared to the market, but curious as to your thoughts.
Yeah. And by the way, one final note on the Steelers. Steelers fans want to hear this. Most of their tough games are at home. They play 2 Thursday night games, both at home. We know home teams fare better on Thursday nights. And we'll see if Tomlin can avoid. And they get the 49ers in week 1, right? With quarterback questions. That's a good time to get the 49ers. They get the Texans week 4, rookie quarterback, presumably. We'll see if Tomlin can avoid the classic Tomlin spot there. That's at Houston after going to the Raiders before the Ravens at home. But yeah, Titans, I love the Titans. I show value in their win total, show value in the division. Just talked about the Jags. They were 6-1 last year to win the division. Now they're the overwhelming favorite. Just talked about how lucky they were with quarterbacks they faced. One of the healthiest teams in the entire NFL last year. Great one-possession games. Just a very fortunate year. They still have a lot of questions on defense. I still have some questions with the offensive line. I think that the Jags are overrated. And look, rookie quarterbacks, you're talking maybe the Colts have a rookie quarterback, maybe the Texans, assuming both will at some point. Rookie quarterbacks historically have not fared well against the spread, just overall. I don't trust either of those teams or rosters or a rookie quarterback. I think this is the Titans win total over. And for the division, I project them at you can get their win total over 7 juiced or under 7.5 juiced. I project them at 8.4, 8.4 wins. One of my biggest values that I'm showing right now, and I have them with one of the six easiest schedules, as you would expect in that division, but they're in a tough conference. So having one of the 6 easiest schedules, I do like. They have 3 straight road games in the middle, but it's, at Pittsburgh, then they're at Tampa with extended rest, and at Jacksonville, manageable. Their division, the interesting thing with with Tennessee's, they do lose a home game because they get Baltimore in London, and then they get a bye after that. The Colts are their only divisional game over the first 10 weeks. But so they're the division's going to be decided at the end of this year. At the end of the year, I mean, they host the Jags at the end of the year. Before that, they get the Texans. 2 weeks before that, they get the Texans. Colts, Jags. They're back into the schedule. It's all division games. I trust in this coaching staff. Remember, last year they were crushed by injuries. Them and the Broncos, and were absolutely. They lost their last 7. They were 7-3. They had some lucky wins, some unlucky losses, and then they lost their last 7 games. Fortunately for me, in the win total under. But this team has a lot of depth now on defense. I assume they're going to keep Tannehill and Henry. It's still Vrabel. People forget how much he always overperforms. Weak division. I think the time is right to buy them while selling the Jags. I have no interest in Indianapolis or Houston. I mean, Houston has. I mean, they're the most. We could spend 1 minute on Houston. We'll see. I'm not a Stroud guy. We'll see how he does, but they have a bye week and then play Carolina in week 8. Carolina's also off of a bye. That could be 1 versus 2 in the draft. It only happened 4 other times at quarterbacks. But they play all their games are on Sundays, no prime time. They do play 4 straight games against the NFC South, and they're in a pretty weak division. But I project them pretty much right on. Not a fan of Indianapolis. Colts, for what it's worth, I project about 6 wins. Their win total is sitting 6.7 once you account for juice. Houston, I project at 5.8. Their win total is 6.2. They do have one of the easiest schedules in the NFL. But I think this is all about Tennessee. Improved offensive line, I think, on the left side. I think their defense will be better. They're going to get healthier. Vrabel's still there. They're coming in now with no expectations. I think this is all about Tennessee. And the Jags are overrated and due for some regression in many, many different aspects across the board. And by the way, Jacksonville has 2 games. We'll see how it works out, but they're going to be in London 2 weeks in a row. I know they're familiar with London, but in London 2 weeks in a row, then come home for the Colts, then a short week on the road at the Saints, then they're at the Steelers, then it's their bye. I mean, and they also get the Chiefs in week 2, who get 10 days to prepare for them. So, and then after their bye, they get the 49ers, who are also off of a bye. So, I don't like that the way that the schedule sets up. They will get to face some, rookie quarterbacks early, and they do get their first Monday Night Football game in 12 years and first Sunday Night Football game in 15 years. That speaks to the expectations and we're selling them high. It's all about the Titans.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes. Oh no, like that's kind of the key, I think, because there obviously is some uncertainty with Houston and Indianapolis but like that benefits you if you sell the Jags, because the Jags are the only team even projected with a winning record for this division in terms of win totals. And when you look at injury luck, I mean, the Titans, remember, they were 7-3 last year, and then everything
lost 7 straight.
The Jaguars, not only is this team like they whiffed on a lot of draft picks, or at least, it appears that way on defense, where, they could be in a lot better spot, but guys just haven't played well. Like Walker, Lloyd hasn't played well. Chasen was a lost pick, essentially. Like, there are a lot of guys that, like, there's not a lot of impact guys that you could point to on their defense outside of Campbell and Aluakon and Josh Allen. But, this is a top heavy team that had some of the best injury luck. Like
second luckiest in injury luck, and then third luckiest with opposing quarterbacks face. And guess what? Now they have a first place schedule in the AFC. Last year they had a joke. The schedule also got lucky in one possession games. Still holes in this roster. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm saying, like, just to put it into context, like with that injury luck, is Travis Etienne played every single game. Christian Kirk, every single game. Evan Ingram, every single game. Trevor Lawrence, every single game. Like, all of their key players essentially played every game. And, this team was like clawed its way to 9-8. They were 3-7. They had to go, they had to win like 6 of their last 7 games just to beat Joshua Dobbs by 4 points to get into the playoffs. And then they had what were they, 30 down against the Chargers? So, like, this Jaguar team is like they are very fragile. Like, Trevor Lawrence is great. There's the star talent they've assembled at the skill positions is great, but
we don't know if he's great yet. I think
you know what I mean? Like, the talent's there, but just like, that's literally Jacksonville's story. They have a few players that are extremely talented and very little depth, and they've been very lucky with injuries. And if anything goes wrong, this could easily just go back to being that 3-7 team that we were heading into their bye that we weren't thinking twice about. So
last year, think about it, their division basically just broke for them. I mean, the Titans, they played Dobbs, like we just said. The Titans had historically bad injury luck. You had the ghost of Matt Ryan at quarterback for the Colts. And then you had Davis Mills. Like, it should be better quarterback play, better injury luck for those teams across the board. I mean, if you look down the stretch, when they beat Houston and then Dobbs at the end of the year, they also beat Chris Streveler and the Jets. That was their last 3 wins. They beat Dallas in overtime. They beat the Ravens on a last-second touchdown by 1. Like, this team got really fortunate down the stretch, and it's the perfect time to sell high on them. We're in complete agreement there.
All right, let's go to the West, because I think like I said, there's a lot of uncertainty with Houston and Indianapolis. Not a ton to glean, I think, and breaking down the minutiae of their schedule. But I do want to talk about the Chargers, because I think every year it seems like, you look at the Chargers and you say, this team, they have upside, but it just never seems to fully come together. I think they're kind of like a kind of like a similar version to the Jaguars, except with a lot better defense, like a rich man's version of the Jaguars. Like, they're pretty stacked at certain spots, but I think the depth falls off quick, and for some reason they've just been getting injured these last few years. So, what do you think of the Chargers in this division that, you got to play the Chiefs twice? The Broncos could be better. They could be terrible again. And then you got the Raiders, who could be terrible again, but maybe could be a little better too. Like, what are your thoughts on how this Charger team kind of stacks up in the division and in the AFC?
Yeah, Broncos historic, like the Ravens 2 years ago had the worst injury luck of all time. Like statistically average games lost to starters, but last year the Broncos had the worst. I mean, their injury luck was horrific on both sides of the ball. So the question is, however, I still think they're a tad overrated because I just don't believe in Russ. So we'll see. I mean, I think you're getting this Peyton bump. People think Russ is going to go back to who he was. I just don't think that he has that same juice which made him Russ. We'll see. I think the Broncos, big positive regression candidate. I still think that they're overrated because of this Peyton and Wilson factor. But we'll see. If Wilson can regain some of that under Peyton, they're definitely dangerous. You're right on the Chargers. The depth is the biggest question with them. I do love the offensive coordinator hire. I think that's a huge factor. Just the play calling and unleashing Herbert. I think he was really held back by that last year. Their defense is always going to be prepared schematically, and they're due for some injury luck on that side of the ball. But Staley's always going to have that defense ready. Now I think the offense will be better prepared, better play calling. I think that'll lead to increased efficiency and explosiveness on that offense. The question is depth. Can they stay healthy? They're aging in a lot of positions, and they have a bye week in week 5. So can they hold up after that the rest of the season? So yeah, they get ideal rest. I like how they're, when they have like long breaks or they get a bye week before the Cowboys at home. I like some of the nuances of their schedule, but the depth worries me with an early bye. They're also at the Chiefs on a short week when Casey has extended rest. That could end up deciding the division, but the depth is the biggest concern. I show a tad bit of value on their over, a tad bit of value on the, let's see. Yeah. And the only reason is I show a tad bit of value on the under on the Broncos, a tad bit of value on the under on the Raiders. I just don't like what the Raiders are doing specifically on defense. And I mean, Jimmy G knows the system. We'll see. I actually am thinking about going under on Kansas City. Under what you can get, I think like an under 12. I project 11-3. And I think the Chiefs got worse overall. They're going to be there. Like they're going to be in the playoffs. They're probably going to win the division. But it looks like they look like a 10-11 team to me. I'll tell you why. So they, number one, they lose a home game to London. They play Miami. It's not going to be an easy game. That comes after an altitude game in Denver, and then they're flying, or to Germany, I should say. Then they have a bye week. Then they get the Eagles at home. It's a tough schedule. But look at the back half of their schedule. Like they go to Green Bay in early December. Green Bay's off like a Thursday night game, gets 10 days of rest. Then they're little trappy games. They have the Bills next. The Bills are off of a bye before that game. Then they're at the Pats, who have 10 days of rest before that game. They're home against the Raiders, who also have 10 days prepare for that game. Home against the Bengals, then at the Chargers. Like this schedule has landmines. I think this team knows how good they are, but I think they got worse overall, just a tad bit. And you want to talk about fortunate injury-wise? The Chiefs, past 2 years, have been extremely, extremely lucky when it comes to injuries. Not only themselves, but the rest of the division. Talked about the Broncos, talked about the Chargers. So, yeah, I mean, these things tend to even out over time. But like, they're really relying on Kadarius Toney to be their number one receiver.
I don't believe that. I feel like it's going to end up. It might be the rookie, Rice. Rashee Rice, right? I think
that's still also.
No, I know. I'm just saying, like it's definitely like there is a path for somebody that's not Kadarius Toney to be that number one receiver, because we know this dude just.
You don't even need injury luck for that. That's just going to happen. Right. So yeah, I'm leaning Chiefs under. I think that they're going to end up. I wouldn't be surprised if the Chargers stay healthy. They're going to win the division, I think, if they can hold up. But to me, I think Chiefs end up 10, 11 wins, and then they're going to be a fucking bitch to take out in the playoffs, because they're always going to be there. But I'm leaning under 12. I don't. it's hard for me to see this team winning 13 games.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. 13 is like kind of like my favorite. Like, I mean, when we talk about the Vikings, we'll get into 13-win teams, but it's just tough with the Chiefs because like the front half of their schedule, I mean, they could also start the year like 9-0. You know, that's not out of the question either. So it's tough for me to fade the Chiefs. I feel like the best way to profit off the Chiefs is kind of, and we'll talk about this every week on the pod, is like you just fade them when they're more like a favorite by more than a field goal, and they'll end up covering. They'll win the game, but they won't cover. And then in that, you know, it doesn't really help your win total. But you know, it's just kind of the week. It's kind of been the way to bet the Chiefs. They're 10-28 when favored by more than 10-28 against the spread when favored by more than a field goal, dating back to November of 2020. So like that's kind of, you know, just their track record is just so good at exceeding these win totals with Andy Reid, and you know, it's like I just don't see like it doesn't like pull me, even if I might show like a couple decimal points of undervalue. Like it's just not really something I want to put my money into for a bunch of months. So like that, I just rather bet the Chiefs like week to week and fade them that way.
Yeah. The one quick note on the Raiders for me, the NFC. Look, I mean, they start 2 road games at the Broncos, at the Bills, and they're home against the Steelers and at the Chargers. Like if they start 0-4, it's over. And it's going to get ugly because listen to their end of their from October 29th on. At the Lions, home against the Giants and Jets, at the Dolphins, home against the Chiefs, home against the Vikings, home against the Chargers, at the Chiefs, at the Colts, which is really your only break. That's on a short week. And then home against the Broncos. Like there's no break there at the end of the season. And their beginning is tough. I don't trust their D. I would not go over on the Raiders. I'm not a believer in any of their futures or upside. But yeah, we'll see if I end up firing on the Chiefs under, but it might be right. It might just, if they're pretty predictable week to week.
Yeah. I mean, like, you know, like, cause like, that's the other thing about, you know, we're trying to talk to these teams and give everybody kind of the, you know, just kind of the outlooks on these teams. Cause, you know, I think we're all interested in that as football fans, but like, there's also just the actual betting angle of like, okay, there has to be like an incentive to tie up your money in like an NFL future, especially in May. And I like betting on the Chiefs, betting against the Chiefs. Is that really the best use? To me, I feel like their predictability outweighs that and just gives you a different way to invest. But I'm totally with you on the Raiders. I think this is a team that they put their fan base through terrible defense after terrible defense after terrible defense. And when I look up this year, I hate all the moves that they made in the offseason on defense. All the guys they signed were not really upgrades on guys that they lost. And, you know, it's just, this just be another version of that terrible defense. So, I mean, that helps the Chargers. That helps the Chiefs, obviously. That could help the Broncos if they're competent, newly competent with Peyton. So, yeah, Raiders it's not looking up for them. And I don't know like exactly what McDaniels really brings at this point. Like, I know he's very well respected as an offensive mind, but even some of the decisions and some of the ways he's running his offense, like I don't know if he's kind of built to win in this NFL, especially going up against the teams he's facing. So yeah, Raiders are the fade for me as well. So we'll be back Monday with our NFC episode as well. Same format. Spend an hour just talking through each of these teams, the schedules, the win totals, whatever might be relevant to you as a bettor. So thank you, everybody, for listening. Of course, you can find Stuckey on Twitter at Stuckey2. You can find me at Chris Raybon. You can find us at those same handles in the free award-winning Action Network app. Until next time, let's get this shmoney.